Welcome to BizTech's Trade Conversation Show. Our guest for today is Damian Adams. He's the president of the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore. The British Chamber of Commerce Singapore, also known as BritCham, is an independent, not-for-profit membership organization supporting approximately 3,500 members from 320 member organizations and is part of the British Chambers of Commerce Global Network. Now, to tell us more, welcome to the show, Damian.
Hi, Brian. Pleased to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me along.
Now, Damian, for a start, could you give us an overview of BritCham in Singapore and your role as the president?
Yeah, sure. So BritCham in Singapore is one of the leading business ecosystems supporting British and what we like to call British businesses. So it's non-exclusive. It has a very international flavor to it. Obviously, the nexus tends to be with Britain, but it's not exclusively for British companies. Really, anyone who has an interest in business that relates to Britain is welcome as a member. We are sector agnostic, or perhaps as I prefer to call it, multi-sector. So we cross a number of different industries and sectors. And really our area of focus is on championing trade and business, people, talent, diversity, inclusion, education skills, and sustainability as well. The neat way I think of describing us is that we see ourselves as a super connector organization. So really we are a brilliant landing point for businesses coming to region who might start off in Singapore and look to expand through ASEAN. And with our member network and their amplified networks, really what we're able to do is leverage the power of that community to provide a really strong networking opportunity for members and businesses who come to this part of the world. My role within that, so I'm the president, which is an elected position. So I chiefly administer, again, an elected board. The chamber is run by a full-time executive director and an executive management team who are salaried staff who are really the engine room of what we do. They are responsible for the day-to-day operations of the chamber, for organizing events, for interacting with our members, for all the things that we do. Whereas my role and that of the board is more voluntary. And so we look after the larger aspects relating to where the management team needs support or how we can represent the chamber through our own organizations.
Now, Damian, could you just give us some insights into the composition of your board and some of the key sectors and causes that they actually represent and champion?
Yeah, so we've got a very varied board. We can have up to 18 people. We don't have a full complement, but we're not far off that. In no particular order, we have representatives, and these are all senior professionals, senior executives within their own organizations, but representing industry, the likes of Sazal, which is the joint venture between Rolls-Royce and Singapore Airlines. We have representatives from the likes of Temasek. We have people who serve from financial institutions, so Standard Chartered, for example. Myself, my day job, I'm a corporate lawyer with a UK headquartered international law firm called Watson, Farley and Williams. We also make sure that we have ample representation from smaller businesses. So SMEs are typically the driving force of a lot of business interests. And so we make sure that we've got SMEs represented from Singapore and similarly key holders of positions from those businesses. In terms of the areas that they represent and the industries that they represent, again, very diverse from, as I say, legal services through to industrial manufacturing, through to built environment, through to financial services, marketing, sustainability, a really, really mixed bag. Education is another key area. We have representatives both from higher education and secondary education. So very, very broad. We try to promote as much diversity as we can within the board, both from gender perspective, racial perspective, business perspective, really to get as strong a board as we can representing the interests of British businesses in this part of the world.
Now, earlier this year, Damian, the UK and Singapore signed the UK-Singapore Digital Economy Agreement. Now, the DEA is deemed to be the most innovative trade agreement ever signed and the first by a European nation aimed at strengthening the trading relationship with Singapore. Could you elaborate a little bit on DEA and its benefits?
Yeah, sure. So the whole purpose of the DEA really is to enhance both Singapore and the UK's roles as business hubs in our respective regions, and really as trusted nodes in global value chains. I mean, there is already a strong connection and linkage between the Singapore and the UK, of course. But the point of the Digital Economy Agreement is really to enable businesses to use their two countries as gateways to a greater range of opportunities in Asia and Europe and beyond. Three main pillars that the DEA has are to facilitate seamless end-to-end trade, to enable trusted data flows, and thirdly, to build trust in digital systems between two countries. And the importance of that is that increasingly as tech becomes or has become pervasive through many, many businesses' operations, the opportunity for digitalization of trade and taking advantage of a trusted agreement between two nations really presents opportunities that haven't existed before.
Now, what industries in particular do you think would benefit from DEA?
I think really there's no exclusion as to particular industries. Those that are undergoing digital transformation, that rely on heavy paper-intensive processes, that rely on data flows between countries, those businesses will be perfectly positioned to take advantage of this, simply because the nature of the DEA itself is designed to help those. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's aimed at any particular industries, because the whole purpose is to be as open and inclusive as possible for industries that transact in data, that are concerned about cybersecurity, that look to do digital trade, and so on. I mean, thinking about the areas in which, or some of the areas in which it can manifest benefits and opportunities, I mean, certainly around digital trade, you can see the benefits for really any trading company that is used to using payment flows or bills of lading or trade services, insofar as they'll be able to access e-payments or e-bills of lading, or indeed use e-trade facilities.
Now, Damian, one of the key things that has characterized 2022 has really been disruption and change, primarily from a geopolitical perspective, and also now the darkening of economic clouds around the world. What are your members feeling on the ground today, and what is the outlook looking like in terms of 2023 from the ground up?
I think in this part of the region, obviously, well, in Singapore in particular, obviously we've seen cost pressures. We've seen inflation come to bear, perhaps less intensively than in other parts of the world, certainly in UK and Europe. But rising costs are a big feature of concern amongst members, and I think that manifests in any number of ways through services they might procure. I think in Singapore in particular, and perhaps in the broader region as well, access to talent remains a key challenge. I mean, obviously during COVID times, sourcing talent, getting them into Singapore was a challenge, not least of all because of the restrictions that were put in place to deal with the response to COVID. But I think what has happened as a result of that shift, if you like, in perspective around talent and remote working and mobility and so on, has certainly made it a more competitive marketplace. So certainly keeping an eye on and managing costs, and also access to talent for continuing business and growing business are probably two key areas.
Now, in terms of the Chamber's focus, what are the key things that you're looking at to do in 2023?
So some of the things that we're focusing on through 2023 would be to continue to champion trade and partnerships. It goes without saying that the Digital Economy Agreement, having landed on the books, now really has to be brought to life. And so a big focus that we will have is helping businesses to navigate what is currently text on the page, and to really realize some of those opportunities that it can have. We have certainly another continuing push around themes such as education. That forms a large part of what we do. One of our key pillars is around education as a continuing theme of the Chamber. And so that will continue to be a push for us to make sure that we connect institutions, that we can certainly support the narrative around access to education, certainly between the two countries. Sustainability is another key theme for us, and that will continue to be so through 2023. We're looking at how we embed sustainability, not just within the Chamber operations itself, but how we can make sure that all our various business committees have sustainability embedded within them as a key part. And I think continuing to look at the future of work, as I said, access to talent, being able to bring on board the right talent, certainly with the changes that we see, coming down the line during the course of 2023 with the introduction of the Compass framework by Ministry of Manpower, helping our businesses or our members to navigate that new framework and to continue to be competitive and to retain access to talent is going to be another key theme for us.
Now, Damian, in your professional life, you're a lawyer with an experience in private equity, venture capital, and advising investors as well. This is a hot area in Singapore right now, as Singapore attracts family offices and wealth management services that's ever expanding. Where do you think the UK plays a role in this ever larger market that's emerging in Singapore?
In a number of ways. I think there is, certainly there is the opportunity that the UK provides for investors who are looking for places in which to make investments. Singapore in particular, and investors in Singapore or in the region through Singapore have historically had, found favor with investing in the UK. I think that extends not just to the traditional asset classes, but also to businesses that are seeking funds for expansion or for growth. I think certainly if you look at the opportunities that exist in startups and scale-ups and growth companies, the UK has firmly established itself as a favorable destination for lots of successful growth companies. So I think the opportunities that exist for investors from this part of the world into the UK are there. I think coming the other way, the same is true. There is a lot of appetite for, we talk of the Indo-Pacific tilt. ASEAN has its own Indo-Pacific framework. The opportunity that exists for capital ex-UK to look for opportunities in this part of the world, as a growth engine, are there. And so I think really the challenge is to make sure that we do as much as we can to connect the two ends of that between the UK and Singapore, to make sure that those opportunities come to fruition, that there are there's the knowledge of how to access those opportunities in region, and really that we can see those capital flows between the two countries.
Damian, it's been a really interesting conversation, and I enjoyed it tremendously. But before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience? There's a number of things, but I'll try to keep it to a short list for you. I think one thing that we are aware of is the size of the opportunity for us as a chamber. You mentioned the number of member organizations we have. You mentioned the number of members that we have. I was pleasantly surprised to learn during our recent business awards, where our guest of honor was Dr. Tan See Leng, Minister for Manpower and Second Minister for Trade and Industry, that the actual number of British businesses here now since 2019 has risen from some 4,500 to 5,700. And if you just take that as a snapshot in of itself, it just shows a 1,200 increase in the number of businesses from Britain that are here in that relatively short period. I think it demonstrates the strength of the relationship and the attractiveness indeed of Singapore as a destination for businesses from the UK. That provides us with both an opportunity and a challenge to increase our network. We've obviously
very proud of the thriving network that we have, but we can always do more, and we try to do as much as we can to do more. The strength of the Chamber really resides in its ability to be a meaningful hub for connections, a network for our community and for our members. And so the more we look to do with that, obviously the more benefits we will be able to provide. And one thing I would also just mention is the strength of relationships that we have as a chamber, not just with UK Department of International Trade and UK government in general, but also with Singapore government. We've benefited over the last 2 or 3 years from an increasingly warm relationship with various ministries and stat boards. We are in regular dialogue with the likes of Enterprise Singapore, with EDB, with MOM, with MTI, with SBF, and so on. And that really demonstrates, I think, the power of the network that we have, which is to really provide that conduit, that connection for businesses to the institutions that really count in Singapore. So, yeah, that's a bit of a shameless plug, if you like. It's not intended to be a sales pitch, but it really is. I can't stress enough that is something that we're very proud of, and it really underscores the opportunity that we have and also the platform that we provide.
Now, Damian, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you very much indeed, Brian.
Now, we've been speaking to Damian Adams, the president of the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore. I'm Brian Fernandez, and this has been BizTech's Trade Conversation Show. This interview will be on our website, www.biztech.asia, as well as our social media platforms. It will also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.